Hey guys, it is time for yet another of my pool plan video. As always, in this video I'll be covering my thoughts and plans on the upcoming banners in DFFOO Global. In this video in particular, I'll be covering the events and banners where Relm and Ignis will be the featured synergy unit. You can also use the timestamp in the video description to skip ahead to the section that you are interested in. First off, a quick look in how I did in the recent banners where we had Kadaj, Leo, Deuce and Vivi. I actually skipped almost all the banners. I only pulled for Deuce and I'm quite happy overall. After the 4 free multis that we got, I spent 1 gem multi-pull just to get the 100 G tokens. Didn't really get anything much out of that. I did get I think 1 Deuce FR. So then I just switched to tickets and I was very happy overall that I got Deuce PT on the 130th tickets. So altogether across all 4 banners I spent only 5000 gems and 130 tickets. So based on the live stream that was recently released, the very first event we will get will be a heretic event featuring Relm with a rework and a newly released FRBT, and a second banner featuring a rerun of Yuna's weapons. This is sort of like a time travel because in the JP version of the game, Relm was released slightly later than this. That being said, because the devs are trying to merge the GL and JP timelines together, I don't think this is anything too surprising and we will likely see a lot of reshuffling of characters over the next few months or so. Relm gets a massive rework because I think this is the first time she's made a return since somewhere near the end of the Lufenia era. Her S1, S2, EX, LD and her special modified HP attack, which is called Tentacle, all gets a massive damage rework. Her EX is an AoE 8 HP dumps across all enemies, and her LD and her Tentacle attack are 7 HP dumps AoE. I must say though that if you really want to play Relm, you do need to go for her PT, and I'll cover more into the reasons why at the later part of this video, but in this particular slide, let me go through what her PT does. So upon use, Relm gets 6 turns PT aura. The strength of the offensive auras are actually pretty good and is actually dependent on where Relm is positioned in the party. This is somewhat similar to how Pain functions. So first of all, once the PT aura is up, everyone in the party gets party brave damage plus 20%, cap plus 50%, HP damage plus 20% and HP damage cap plus 30%. This is more or less the standard that we get across most PTs nowadays. However, for Relm, additionally, and this is on top of those figures, for Relm herself and any ally on Relm's right, you also get plus brave damage and brave damage cap plus 30%, HP damage plus 30% and HP damage cap plus 20%. Again, this stacks with the aforementioned auras. So for Relm herself and anyone on her right, you actually get quite a lot of boost from the BT aura, but that's not all really. So for Relm and again for those on her right, you will also get a free turn after an enemy with Relm's sketch debuff X. This plays into more or less Relm's kit and her gimmick. Before this, when an enemy that's debuffed with sketch takes a turn, Relm actually warps her turn right after and gets an instant free turn. What her BT aura does now is it not only allows her to do that, but also all allies on the right. For example, also this means that if you place Relm in party slot number 3, meaning that the rest of the party is on her right, anytime a sketched enemy takes a turn, all 3 party members will warp their turn and get an instant free turn. I suppose I probably shouldn't say instant because that can be a bit misleading. All 3 characters will get a free turn immediately after the sketched enemy X. Moving on to Relm's FR, upon use, Relm's FR inflicts 2 turn sketch on all enemies, which is pretty handy and actually synergizes very well with her PT. Relm's FR effects have 2 conditionals. The first is Whenever you do a magic attack on your turn, you get plus 40%, and if you attack an enemy with a sketch debuff, you get plus 40%. This is, in my mind, a bit average in terms of conditionals because you do need to build a party that has magic based damage, but the fact that her FR lands sketch means that at least the second conditional shouldn't be too challenging to meet. Moving on quickly to Yuna. Yuna gets a rework as well as access to Force level 50 on this event. Yuna's rework isn't too massive because she wasn't featured too long ago. Her EX, LD, and her modified HP attack and brave attack called Sonic Wings and Energy Ray, as well as her FR, all receives a damage rework, which is pretty nice. The real interesting thing about Yuna's rework, to me at least, is that her FR conditionals receives a major update. Now, anytime anyone in a party, including Yuna, takes a turn when you do not have any debuffs up on that character, you get plus 70%, and if you were to do a modified brave and HP attack, you get plus 40%. On top of this, as long as you do not have any debuffs up, you get a bonus HP damage and HP damage cap plus 50%, which is always very nice. Now, while the second conditional is very restrictive, not many characters you actually want to press the modified brave on HP attack. Both conditionals together for Yuna means that you can potentially get up to 110% HP damage bonus just by using a modified brave and HP attack, because the first conditional should be more or less a given anyway. All things put together, my plans here is to skip this event. I don't have a lot of interest in how Relms gimmick will come into play, especially based on how I like to approach this game, but I'll cover more into the reasons why later on in the video as well. Before moving on to Ignis's event, I just want to do a quick overview about this particular banner because it was also mentioned in the global live stream. So before Ignis event debuts, we will be getting a banner featuring 3 FRs and 3 BT weapons, and the characters here will be Ace, Dorgann, and Beatrix. There is nothing new on these banners because all 3 characters have all their weapons released already to date. However, with the release of this banner, all 3 characters will get their Force level 50 unlocked, and they won't really get any rework. But at least on this one banner, you have all their weapons up to their BT available. Now, I won't go too much into detail about all these 3 characters because they aren't really getting any major changes. But overall, in my mind, this is a decent banner, not the best triple FRBT banner that we've gotten before. There's some very good ones, like for example the recent Estos one that we've received. I think that was Estos, Rosa, and Ursula. This banner itself isn't too bad either. I don't think it's too far off. And the main reason I say that is that the 3 characters featured here have a slight variation in their roles. So for example, Beatrix is more a counter tank, and properly built and used, she can have her Holy Knight protection buff up and mitigate HP damage across your party. Dorgann himself is more functional as a linked attacker, where he gets his image slash plus full up attack anytime you break an enemy. Ace is more your typical magical DPS. He does also do some nice often damage with his trap debuff. All 3 of them are still quite decent even though they haven't received a rework, and they still can work very well in today's meta in the endgame Shinryu content. And of course, if you are fairly new to the game and you want to build up your roster to have more variety in the roles that your characters have, this is one pretty decent banner to pull for. Of course, you do have to take it with a pinch of salt because, as I said, all 3 characters won't get a rework. So by this point in time in the game, they are slightly aged, and as far as gacha goes or gacha game goes, you typically really want to get characters as soon as they're released so that they have a longer lifespan. Personally, for myself, I have Dorgann and Beatrix fully built already, And I have Ace's BT, although I don't have his FR, but really just one FR missing I don't think is worthy enough for me to spend resources on, so for that simple reason I am skipping this banner. So moving on to Ignis's raid event, and we get two banners here, the first featuring Ignis and the second featuring Queen, and we actually didn't get Queen too long ago, and I guess this is a byproduct of the fact that they are reshuffling the banners and events around. Queen herself won't get any rework, she will get Force level 50 unlocked, but all her weapons are otherwise reruns as well. So I'll focus more on Ignis. Ignis gets a rework and a newly released FR and BT weapon. Ignis's S1 and S2, which typically is more to recover Brave, now recovers even more Brave. He does get a damage rework, but that's more across his modified HP attack because that's what you typically use to land damage with Ignis. But importantly, his EX and LD receives major rework across the damage that they can do. I think something notable is that his EX now is 15 HP dumps if I'm not mistaken. Very nicely also, for quality of life, his buffs now are longer in duration. So the Ambrosia buff from his S2 will now last for 9 turns, whereas his Sage Fire debuff, which is the one that he lands on the enemies from his LD, now lasts 8 turns. Ignis's PT weapon is the one that really skyrockets him in my mind. His PT gives him a 10 turn aura, and the party auras are pretty the par, you know, it's nothing really out of the ordinary versus what Relm has, at least as an example. But you get party brave damage and brave damage cap plus 50%, HP damage plus 20%, and HP damage cap plus 30%. The real value from the BT though comes from the fact that it now allows Ignis to trigger a full up attack after his own turn. This is very similar to Deuce BT if you have recently pulled for Deuce, but it allows Ignis to do AoE, brave and HP damage as well as battering the party every time he takes an action, and this is 6 HP dumps AoE, so it is pretty cool overall and does make a major chunk of damage for his DPS. This follow-up attack also extends all of his buffs by 1 turn. Moving on to Ignis FR. Ignis FR has 2 conditionals, and they are actually really good because they are pretty generic. So the first just requires you to have more than 100% HP, or I should say 100% or more HP as you end your turn. You get plus 40%, and the second is as long as you end your turn with no debuffs up, you get plus 40%. Not only does both the conditionals work with any attack, both the conditionals just requires you to end your turn, so they also give you the bonus even if you're doing a non-attacking ability, such as a force case charging ability, such as Ignis's S1 or S2. I really like the changes in Ignis's kit, and for me I will be pulling for him, and I hope to get his FR and BT weapon. So moving on to this part of the video where I'll be covering more my thoughts and my opinion on the characters and the reworks that they've received. First of all, I won't be covering the additional banner that features Ace, Dorgann and Beatrix because like I said earlier, they won't be getting any rework. So instead I did give a little bit of opinion on that particular slide. Again, you can use a timestamp to jump back if you want to revisit that particular banner. Here I'll be covering Ignis, Queen, Yuna and Relm, and I'll start off first with Ignis. So as you can see, typically I split characters just only across 2 categories. The first one is what I call good value category, where I feel the character is really very good to the point where even regardless of who you already have in your roster, it's likely that you get quite a lot of value out of these characters. Characters in the role fulfillment category aren't really that bad, it's just the fact that depending on who you have already in your roster or how you like to approach the game, for example, you can actually get by without these characters. So Ignis is in the good value category, and I suppose a lot of this is also due to the bias on how I like to approach the game. So first of all, I place a lot of additional value on force gauge charging characters because I always bring one to Shinryu stages because I always like to charge to 100% as quickly as possible. Ignis has that, but it's not only that, he has really additional value in the fact that he can also double as a very effective DPS character, which is actually insane because his support auras aren't a slouch to begin with. He can provide AoE healing to the party, he can provide debuff immunity to the party, so he has a lot of those, you know, support type utility or roles in his kit. But the fact that his BT aura now also provides him a follow-up attack, you could, as always, for example, go BT plus into his BT mode, and his attacks, especially his EX with his follow-up attack, does do quite a decent chunk of damage. Obviously, it won't outdamage the top tier DPS gods such as Estos or such, but you know, for a support character, he probably does more damage than the typical support. The rest of his kit does come into play as well. You know, I mentioned already that he does provide the burst healing if you need it, he does provide the debuff immunity that if you need it. But the other thing going for him also is the fact that his FR conditional is really very good. You know, no matter who you put in your party, you can probably use him as the main FR and you still get both bonuses every single turn. Not many characters can boast this. There are some others, of course, with generic FR conditionals, but this means overall that Ignis can fit a variety of roles in your roster, and not only that, he can probably do most of them fairly well as well. Moving on quickly to Queen, I won't spend a lot of time on Queen because she's a very recent character. Queen's real strength is that she really supports attacks that come off modified Brave and HP attacks, and you can certainly build a party around her and capitalize on that and, you know, get a lot of value out of it. But really the fact is that it is very challenging, or not challenging, I should say very restrictive to try to build around this sort of gimmick. And considering, you know, there are many other ways they can pump out damage, I don't think it's really worth it to try to build around Queen. As for Yuna, I think Yuna's utility in debuff cleansing, sadly, at least in my opinion, has passed its prime. Back in the launch of the game, Yuna's value was right up there because she was really, I think, the only character that can cleanse debuffs. Nowadays, there are characters who can outright give you immunity. I think the best example actually is Wise, if you did pull for him, because he provides you debuff immunity even if the enemy has guaranteed hit debuffs, which is insane. But the other thing going against Yuna is the timing of her release, because we have Ignis released around the same time as well. Ignis can give you debuff immunity outright. Obviously, it won't work against guaranteed hit debuffs, but most of the time, you know, debuffs can be prevented anyway, and if you can prevent debuffs, it's much better than having to cleanse debuffs. Now, if the stage doesn't have debuffs, then the interesting thing about Yuna is actually her reworked FR conditionals, because like I said earlier in the video, if you are spamming modified Brave on HP attacks, you can get as high as plus 110% a turn, which is significantly higher than the average force bonus gains. Yes, it is restrictive because it requires you to use modified Brave and HP damage attacks, but there are ways that you can really abuse this. And one example that I can give you is that you can, you know, enter into Yuna's force time and then immediately use 6 Sonic Wings or Energy Rays, which will give you plus 110% every single turn, assuming you don't have any debuffs up. And by the time you exit Yuna's BT mode, you'll be at like 860% force bonus, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it will place you in a position where you have like 3 force time turns remaining and everyone still have their force echoes available, minus the 1 FR used from Yuna at the start. So Yuna can be a simple way, a very simple way to quickly build up your force bonus percentage and save all your force echoes for later part of the fight. That being said, I'm not too particularly interested in that, and I think it's actually better to just become immune to debuffs anyway than to try to cleanse debuffs. If you don't have any debuff immunity and the stage is very debuff heavy, it also doesn't mean that Yuna is the best choice, because then anytime the boss lands a debuff on you, you'd have to spend a turn to cleanse it, which is a waste of force time turns, and if you don't cleanse it and you're in Yuna's force time, then you lose out on one of her force conditionals. On top of that, although Yuna did get a rework on her damage, it isn't particularly high or exciting. In fact, Ignis and Deuce will outdamage her, and Deuce I think is also another good example because she was released not too long ago and shares the same crystal color as Yuna as well, so if you want a white crystal force gauge charger, you can also go for Deuce, assuming you pull for her. So it's also just bad luck in terms of Yuna's timing of release, I guess. Finally, moving on to Relm, and it might seem like a surprise on why Relm is placed far to the right. I don't mean to place her there to show that she's worse than Queen or Yuna. I just sort of clumped all three characters together. Similar to Ignis, a lot of how I place Relm there is also due to personal bias against how the kit functions. Don't get me wrong, actually Relm's kit can be actually very fun to play. However, I think it is counterproductive to the force time mechanics that is currently in the endgame. The strength in Relm's kit is the fact that her BT can give herself and her allies free turns immediately after the enemy acts, which can be abused in a variety of ways. You could, for example, use that as a way to quickly spam force echoes across all three characters. So by the time the standard two enemies have taken their turns, your entire party will have taken 2 turns each as well, which is just nice to use every single character's force echoes, so that by the time your next natural turn comes along, you already have like a super high force bonus percentage, and all without increasing the turn count. However, the fact that you get free turns immediately after the enemy takes a turn also means that outside of using force echoes, you'll be very quickly burning through your entire force time, and Relm's damage itself isn't the highest. It's 7 or 8 HP dumps AoE at best. There are some ways you can of course abuse this. For example, you can position your party so that you get turn manipulators to get free turns. Seed Rains is a good example. If you place Seed Rains on Relm's right, if an enemy takes a turn, Seed Rains will get to act as well immediately after, and he can then use his turn manipulation to pull characters around and prevent other enemies from attacking. You can also put turn disablers after Relm so that Relm can warp their turns, or you can use low turn rate characters or characters that self-delay in exchange for more power, and that way they get multiple free turns as well. So there's some ways to really abuse the kit, and there's a lot of fun in that, but it really is just I don't like it, mainly to the fact that it doesn't sort of jive with the way I like to approach the game, where I like to try to complete the stage within one force time. So Relm's free turns doesn't really help with that. That being said, if you really don't mind going into the force retain time, and if many of the runs really go into that anyway, then Relm might be an interesting player to use. If everyone in your party is at force level 50, you get like 500% force retain after your force time is over, and you can capitalize on this to get multiple free turns during Relm's turn, or I should say the enemy taking their turn, for very good damage and quickly closing out the fight. However, lastly, the other aspect that I don't like is that the free turns is tied to the enemy getting a turn, and that's also another approach that I don't normally take myself, just due to playstyle. I really try to do runs where the enemies don't get any turns at all, and maybe at most 1 or 2 turns. And if the enemies aren't getting turns, it also means that Relm isn't giving free turns to the entire party. Whether or not to pull for Relm, I think it just depends on whether you find her gimmick fun and whether or not you think you'll be using it a lot. So that brings us to the end of this video.
In summary, I plan to ticket, and if I have to, I will use gems, but hopefully not. For Ignis, FRBT, I plan to skip Relm and Queen. I skipped Queen the last time and I will also skip her here. I already have Yuna's FR and I have her BT as well, but her BT isn't max at all. I don't want to spend BT ingots on her yet. And I plan to skip Dorgann, Ace and Beatrix banner. As always, I hope the video has been helpful, and if you enjoy the content, do leave a like or a subscribe or a comment. Till then, I'll catch you guys in the next pool plan video. Bye!